Israel said it is prepared to fight for months or longer to defeat Gaza's Hamas rulers as its ground defense intensifies with more airstrikes and artillery fire.
People scrambled for aid at Rafah, apparently after trucks crossed over the border on Monday, bringing much-needed supplies to locals.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in the United States trying to convince lawmakers to stop stalling on more than $61 billion in supplemental funding for Ukraine's military.
Ukraine is just a stepping stone for Russia.
And the United Nations is appealing for $46.4 billion to provide life-saving assistance to more than 180 million of the world's neediest people. Today is Tuesday, December 12th, and this is VOA's International Edition. Good morning, I'm Kim Lewis. Israel said it is prepared to fight for months or longer to defeat Gaza's Hamas rulers as its ground offense intensifies with more airstrikes and artillery fire. Meanwhile, more aid trucks have been entering Gaza through the Rafah border crossing as fighting continues and smoke can be seen rising in the distance. AP correspondent Charles de Ledesma reports.
People scrambled for aid at Rafah, apparently after trucks crossed over the border on Monday, bringing much-needed supplies to locals. It comes as Palestinians face severe shortages of food, water and other basic goods in the Gaza Strip, with very little aid allowed in since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. Israeli forces are battling Palestinian militants in Gaza's two largest cities, with civilians still sheltering along the front lines, even after massive waves of displacement across the besieged territory. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said on Monday that Israel had no intention of staying permanently in the Gaza Strip. Gallant said that Israel was open to discussing alternatives about who would control the territory as long as it was not a group hostile to Israel. VOA's Rick Pantaleo has more.
Israeli Defense Minister Gallant said that Israel was open to discussing alternatives about who would control the territory as long as it was not a group hostile to Israel.
Israel will take any measures in order to destroy Hamas, but we have no intention to stay permanently in Gaza Strip. We only take care of our security and the security of our citizens alongside the borders with Gaza and elsewhere.
Gallant also said that Israel was open to possibly reaching an agreement with Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah in Lebanon on condition any agreement included a safe zone along the border and proper guarantees. Rick Pantaleo, VOA News.
The 193-member United Nations General Assembly is likely to vote Tuesday on a draft resolution demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the conflict between Israel and Hamas militants. The move comes after the U.S. vetoed on Friday a UN Security Council demand for immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in the United States trying to convince lawmakers to stop stalling on more than $61 billion in supplemental funding for Ukraine's military. VOA National Security Correspondent Jeff Selden has more.
Welcome to the National Defense University in Washington. With a standing ovation, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy thanked the U.S. military for its support before pivoting to a message for U.S. lawmakers.
Ukraine is just a stepping stone for Russia.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's real goal,
his real target, is the freedom. Freedom people enjoy from Warsaw to Chicago to Yokohama.
Zelenskyy asked U.S. politicians not to betray Ukraine's soldiers, saying more weapons are needed to defeat Russia's forces.
We know what to do, and you can count on Ukraine, and we hope just as much to be able to count on you.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told Zelenskyy America's support for Ukraine is unshakable and agreed on the danger of letting Russia win.
Putin still believes that he can outlast Ukraine and that he can outlast America.
And Austin said Washington's commitments must be kept.
If we do not stand up to the Kremlin's aggression today, if we do not deter other would-be aggressors, we will only invite more aggression, more bloodshed, and more chaos.
Ukraine's president is expected to make a similar plea Tuesday when he meets with lawmakers on Capitol Hill and with President Joe Biden at the White House. Jeff Selden, VOA News, the Pentagon.
We're following these other stories from around the world. The whereabouts of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny are currently unknown, with his allies saying he is no longer at the penal colony where he had been imprisoned since last year. Russian officials have not said where Navalny was taken, and there has been no comment from the Kremlin. Egyptians began voting Monday on the second day of a presidential election in which President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi faces no serious challenger and is certain to win another term, keeping him in power until 2030. The three-day vote is taking place amid a staggering economic crisis in Egypt. A decision by India's top court to uphold a 2019 decision by the government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to revoke special status for the state of Jammu and Kashmir was met with celebrations and condemnations on Monday. The court said special status was a temporary constitutional provision that could be revoked. The United Nations is appealing for $46.4 billion to provide life-saving assistance to more than 180 million of the world's neediest people in 72 countries over next year. Also, as negotiations wind down in Dubai, the world is waiting to see the results of the COP28 climate change conference. However, getting everyone there to agree on the text for a final statement has been challenging. VOA's Steve Karish spoke with Sherelle Blazer, Senior Director of the Sierra Club's International Climate and Policy Campaign, about what can be expected.
You know, you have to come to consensus between, every country, which is, the parties. And so really the controversy is between really OPEC countries, mostly not wanting to use the words fossil fuel phase out in the text, and it being important that we do name fossil fuels and not just coal and not just emissions with regard to a phase out. Because, of course, if we want to get to net zero by 2050 then.
And what's the Sierra Club's take on all this? What are you hoping to see?
Sierra Club is hoping to see a fast phase out of fossil fuel sources so that we can get to net zero and start to stay within, the 1.5 degree warming that we've been warned, that the science says is necessary, and the IPCC has warned, will help us to avoid the most catastrophic version of climate crisis.
Well, that's what you're hoping to see in the long run. With respect to COP28 specifically, would it be better to maybe give a little on the language of the final agreement, to not come down so hard on fossil fuels, to get those OPEC countries on board for future cooperation?
Well, this is what the 28th COP. I don't know. That seems like seeing how short time is and how long we've been at this. If we had more time on our hands, I might agree with you. But at some point, we do have to say, okay, the science is clear. We have to phase out of these fossil fuels if we want to stay alive, if we don't want food, shortages, and we don't want drought and, catastrophic climate conditions, then we do have to at least agree to start pulling back on fossil fuels, which isn't a big ask, right? This is not something that will happen tomorrow. This is just something for us to all work toward.
So the science is clear. We do need to cut back on fossil fuels if we're going to prevent this climate disaster from coming. What can the average citizen do? It's one thing to talk about what the governments are going to do, what groups like the Sierra Club or the large corporations are going to do. But what can the average citizen do to mitigate some of these coming problems?
I feel like, and this is my personal opinion, people do what is cultural. And unfortunately, we have a culture and a society that is dependent on fossil fuels, everything from plastics to, the way that our mode of transportation. And so really we are depending on governments to change the culture, to change the policy so that we can begin moving in a different way with market mechanisms and, products that are available to us. And you know what I mean? So, I'm all for people recycling and, not having the plastic straws and all of those good things. All of that's great. Turn off your lights, all that good stuff. But really, it's going to take widespread and massive culture change.
That was Steve Karish speaking with Sherelle Blazer, Senior Director of the Sierra Club's International Climate and Policy Campaign. Special Counsel Jack Smith on Monday asked the Supreme Court to take up and rule quickly on whether former President Donald Trump can be prosecuted on charges he plotted to overturn the 2020 election results. I spoke with John Fortier, Senior Fellow at American Enterprise Institute, for more insight on this development.
Well, as of now, the trial is scheduled to begin in early March, in the middle of campaign season, where Donald Trump will presumably be just leading up to the Super Tuesday primaries. And there is a current appeal to the appeals court, which might take some time. And if that were to be considered, then maybe that would later have to go to the Supreme Court. And I think that the Smith prosecutor team is eager to have the trial go forward at an earlier date. As we get closer to the election, or if Donald Trump were to win the election and get back into office, there would be some much clearer prohibitions or delays on the types of things that he might be prosecuted for. So essentially, I think that the Trump campaign believes that it should get and stay in court, but also that it doesn't have to rush the trial. And if the trial happens later, it's more likely to be pushed back and we'll have the election, and then perhaps it won't happen at all, or maybe it will be delayed even further.
And also, I guess the question that is going to be looked at is whether a former president is absolutely immune from federal prosecution for crimes committed while in office, or is constitutionally protected from federal prosecution when he has been impeached but not convicted before the criminal proceedings begin. This is something that I guess would be historical if they rule on this.
There are some things that the court has already determined, and that typically deals with a sitting president and the ability to not have suits against him while he's in office, either directly at all, or perhaps we'll have to wait until after the term. But it's a little less clear. A former president, the question of whether these actions were while he was in office as the president, or maybe as a private citizen or a presidential candidate. And I think there's a lot of gray area where the court has ruled in some parts, but not in others. And so what the Trump campaign is looking to say is that there are several ways in which the president might actually be immune from this suit and wants the court to decide. But again, whether it's 2 stages with the appeals court deciding and then perhaps to the Supreme Court, which would take a longer time, or whether this more expedited appeal to the Supreme Court by Jack Smith prosecutor works will determine the timing of this trial.
And just looking at some historical perspective, it would not be unprecedented speed. Just looking nearly 50 years ago, the justices acted within 2 months of being asked to force President Richard Nixon to turn over Oval Office recordings in the Watergate scandal. And also looking at the High Court just a few days effectively decide the 2000 presidential election for Republican George W. Bush over Democrat Al Gore. It is not something unprecedented, but maybe unusual.
I think the question here is there a very compelling reason why the trial should go forward as quickly as it should? I think Donald Trump and his team think that this is not a compelling reason, that he should have all of his levels of appeal. And the prosecutors believe that if they really need to get this trial now, because we don't want to get too far into election season. And ultimately, this question of a speedy trial, I think, will also be looked at, just because the Constitution does say that you have a right to a speedy trial, but it really is a little bit more about the accused, the defendant. You don't want someone spending lots of time in jail or waiting around for a trial. It's not typically thought of as much of a speedy trial as a right for the government or the prosecutor to have. So the court will look at all of these things and decide whether it's important for them to act now or whether several rounds of appeals might happen, and that might actually result in the delaying of the beginning of this trial.
That was John Fortier, Senior Fellow at American Enterprise Institute. VOA's International Edition continues. I'm Kim Lewis. The leaders of Guyana and Venezuela will meet this week to discuss the escalating dispute over the Essequibo region that separates the two countries. VOA's Rick Pantaleo has more.
The meeting between Guyana's President Mohamed Ifran Ali and Nicolas Maduro, President of Venezuela, will be held Thursday behind closed doors on the Caribbean island of St. Vincent. Guyana's president says he is coming to the meeting with goodwill, but insists that the case be heard at the International Court of Justice.
100%. We are not going to remove from the ICJ. We are not going to step out of the ICJ. We have made it very clear that this case shall be settled at the ICJ.
The disputed Essequibo region is said to be rich in oil and minerals, and it represents a third of Guyana's territory. Earlier this month, Venezuela voters backed a referendum on whether to claim sovereignty over the region. When Ali was asked if the U.S. has committed any military aid, he said he signed an advanced defense agreement with the U.S. to ensure that major training programs and exercises will continue. He further also assured Guyanese living in the disputed territory that there was no need to be fearful as the border debate continues. Rick Pantaleo, VOA News.
In Japan, where it remains taboo to speak out against sexual violence, one former Japanese soldier who is fighting a landmark sexual assault case in court says she believes the verdict due to be handed down on Tuesday is important for the country's future. Diane Toh of Reuters reports.
Former Japanese soldier Rina Ganoi is hoping for change in her country ahead of a verdict due Tuesday in a landmark battle she's waging in Japan's courts. She's accused male military personnel of sexual assault, drawing global attention for going public in a place where speaking out against sexual abuse is taboo. Ganoi believes the ruling carries weight for Japan's future, where she says there are many sexual assault and harassment cases, but criminal consequences are very light.
It is important and would be good for Japanese society if we can show in court that harassment is a crime. I'm not looking for a light or severe punishment. I want them to say it's a crime.
Ganoi is accusing 3 former Ground Self-Defense Force colleagues of sexually assaulting her in 2021. All 3 have denied the allegations. Even before then, Ganoi has said she was constantly harassed since enlisting in 2020. After superiors did nothing about her complaints, she left the force last year and went public with her claims. Ahead of the Fukushima District Court's ruling on her case, Ganoi says she feels so much pressure that she's been losing sleep. But at the very least, the 24-year-old has already raised international awareness of Japanese women's plight. This year, Time magazine named Ganoi to its list of 100 emerging world leaders, and the BBC selected her for its list of the world's 100 influential women.
I appreciate the fact that they value what I'm doing. There's a tendency in Japan when people speak up, they get criticized. I've gotten many derogatory comments, but I know the world values what I'm doing, so I don't think I made a mistake.
Japan's defense ministry has issued a public apology to her and announced 5 of the men involved had been dismissed and 4 others punished. Ganoi has also lodged a civil case against the government for failing to prevent abuse and to investigate her claims.
That was Diane Toh reporting from Reuters. For many years, a recycling company in Los Angeles has been giving a free Christmas tree to anyone who brings trash or recycling in exchange. In doing so, the company hopes to promote the proper way to dispose of trash and to eliminate illegal dumping in the city. Angelina Bagdasarian has the story narrated by Anna Rice.
Los Angeles resident Marissa came to pick up a Christmas tree for her daughter from an unlikely place, a company called Active Recycling.
My daughter has a heart condition. I didn't have money to buy a tree this year, and and she really wanted one. So I saw this on Facebook, and I told her she wanted to come. She said yes.
Every year, Active Recycling encourages people to bring recycling or trash in exchange for a free Christmas tree. The man behind the idea is company president Errol Siegel.
This is my 8th year of giving away 1,000 Christmas trees, free. I don't sell them, but you need to bring in recycling or you need to bring in some trash.
Santa Claus was also on hand to give away some of the trees personally. Not only is it good for the planet, says General Manager Diego Rojas, but it's good for the soul.
I feel joy every time I got to do this, because this is one way we could give back to the communities. I've met a couple of people that they might be going through a tough situation, and they may be in the situation where they can't afford a Christmas tree. So by us giving a Christmas tree, brings a blessing and happiness to their house.
Some of the company employees know only too well how a tough situation can hit a person.
Due to the COVID-19, I lost my job at a restaurant and I experienced homelessness.
I want to be able to help other young men and kind of show them the different steps and stuff to get out of homelessness, get back to work, and be able to have your own place.
At a Christmas market, these trees would cost about $100 each. Here, Active Recycling employees hand out about 100 trees a day.
It smells like Christmas because it does to me. The trees smell good. They're fresh and they smell good. Just to be happy for the holidays. Just to be happy.
And to be happy, even if just for a moment, is what the holiday season is all about. For Angelina Bagdasaran in Los Angeles, California, Anna Rice, VOA News.
This has been International Edition on the Voice of America. On behalf of everyone at VOA, thank you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Kim Lewis.